The crimson sky of Nibiru what dashed like tears from a dying god. Elder Zephyra pressed her six-fingered hand against the crystalline viewing panel of the mountain sanctuary, watching the toxic storms ravage what remained of their once verdant world. Her translucent skin, normally a beautiful azure that shifted with her emotions, had dulled to a sickly gray, a reflection of both her despair and the poisoned atmosphere that now choked their planet. "The atmospheric processors are failing again," reported Technician Vex, his voice barely a whisper through his breathing apparatus. The young Nibirian's gill slits fluttered frantically as he struggled to filter the contaminated air. "Sector 7 has gone completely dark. We've lost another 1,000 acres of arable cavern space." Zephyra's tentacle-like appendages, which served as both secondary arms and emotional indicators, drooped with exhaustion. In the old days, before the great convergence that had torn their world apart, those same appendages would have glowed with bioluminescent patterns during important council meetings. Now they remained dim, conserving what little energy her weakened body could muster. The Nibirians had been a proud species once. Their civilization had flourished for over 50,000 Earth years, built on principles of harmony with their planet's natural electromagnetic fields. They had developed technology that worked in concert with Nibiru's unique crystalline core, creating a paradise where energy flowed freely and abundantly. Their cities had been living organisms themselves, grown from specially cultivated coral-like substances that could process waste, generate power, and even provide food. But that was before the convergence. 3 solar cycles ago, Nibiru's elliptical orbit had brought it closer to the gas giant Kronos than it had been in millennia. The gravitational stresses had been unlike anything their scientists had predicted. Massive tectonic shifts had cracked the planet's crystalline core, disrupting the electromagnetic fields that their entire civilization depended upon. Volcanic eruptions had filled the atmosphere with toxic particulates, while electromagnetic storms had fried most of their technology. The worst part had been watching their food production systems collapse. The bioluminescent crops that had sustained them for generations required specific electromagnetic frequencies to photosynthesize. With the planetary field disrupted, the plants had simply died. All of them. Within a matter of days, a world that had never known hunger was facing complete starvation. "Elder," Bex continued, his voice growing more urgent, "the Council of Survivors is requesting your presence in the deep chamber. They say it's about the signal." Zephyra's primary heart skipped a beat, while her secondary cardiac organ picked up the slack, an evolutionary adaptation that had served the Nibirians well during their planet's frequent electromagnetic fluctuations. The signal. She had almost convinced herself it had been a fever dream brought on by malnutrition. 7 rotations ago, as she had been calibrating one of their last functioning long-range communication arrays, she had detected something impossible, a response to their automated distress beacon. For months, they had been broadcasting their plea for help across the galaxy, using the ancient emergency frequencies established by the Galactic Cooperative. But space was vast, and Nibiru was located in a relatively isolated spiral arm. The chances of anyone receiving their transmission had been infinitesimally small. Yet someone had answered. The response had been brief, almost cryptic. "Received your distress call. Help is coming. Prepare for contact." But what had chilled Zephyra's blood was not the message itself, but the translation matrix her computer had needed to parse it. The signal had been transmitted in a language her systems identified as Terran Standard, the dialect of the beings known throughout the galaxy as Deathworlders. Zephyra made her way through the winding passages of the mountain sanctuary, her feet silent on the soft bioluminescent moss that still managed to grow in the filtered air of their underground refuge. The passages had been carved by their ancestors using harmonic resonance technology, creating smooth, flowing tunnels that followed the natural electromagnetic currents of the mountain. Now those same passages served as their last bastion against the toxic world outside. The deep chamber was the largest of their underground spaces, originally designed as a meditation center where Nibirians could commune with the planet's electromagnetic soul. Now it housed the remnants of their civilization, roughly 3,000 individuals out of a population that had once numbered in the hundreds of millions. The Council of Survivors sat in a circle at the chamber's center, their forms barely visible in the dim emergency lighting. Each council member represented a different caste of their society: Zephyra for the Wisdom Keepers, Engineer Prime Kaldor for the Builders, Bioshaper Nyx for the Life Tenders, and Defense Coordinator Thane for the Guardians. "Show her," Thane said without preamble. His muscular frame, built for the rare occasions when Iberians had needed physical protection, was now gaunt from rationing. But his voice still carried the authority of someone accustomed to making life-or-death decisions. Kaldor activated a portable holographic projector, one of their few pieces of technology that still functioned reliably. The air above the device shimmered, and suddenly the chamber was filled with the image of a spacecraft unlike anything in the Iberian databases. The vessel was massive, easily a kilometer in length, and its design philosophy was completely alien to Iberian sensibilities. Where Iberian ships were grown rather than built, featuring flowing, organic curves that worked in harmony with natural forces, this craft was clearly constructed. It had sharp angles, armored plating, and what appeared to be weapon systems integrated into its very structure. "It dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of our system 6 hours ago," Kaldor explained, his engineer's mind struggling to comprehend the vessel's brutal efficiency. "It's not like anything in our historical records. The energy signatures are wrong. They're using controlled fusion reactions for propulsion, antimatter containment fields for weapons, and their hull is composed of materials we don't even have words for." Bioshaper Nyx leaned forward, her healing appendages twitching with nervous energy. "I've been analyzing the biological data we received with their initial response. The crew members aboard that vessel, they come from a world that should be impossible for complex life to evolve. Gravity 3 times galactic standard, atmospheric pressure that would crush our lung cavities, background radiation levels that would sterilize most planets. Deathworlders," Zephyra whispered, the word carrying implications that chilled her to her core. Throughout the galaxy, the species known as humans, or Terrans, were spoken of in hushed tones. They had emerged from a planet that galactic scientists classified as a Class 12 death world, a place where life should not exist, let alone thrive. Their evolution had been shaped by constant warfare, both against their environment and each other. They had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, global pandemics, and countless other catastrophes that would have wiped out most civilizations. When they had finally achieved space travel, they had done so through methods that seemed insane to the rest of the galaxy. Instead of developing careful, harmonious technologies like most spacefaring species, they had simply strapped themselves to controlled explosions and hoped for the best. Their first space stations had been built using materials and methods that prioritized function over elegance, creating utilitarian structures that could withstand the harsh realities of space. "They've requested permission to land," Thane continued. "Their message was direct. They want to meet with our leadership to discuss mutual assistance opportunities." Zephyra felt her chromatophores shift to a deep purple, the color of profound unease. "Mutual assistance? We're a dying civilization with nothing to offer. What could they possibly want from us?" The question hung in the air like the toxic particles that choked their atmosphere. Outside, the wind howled through the mountain peaks, carrying with it the chemical signature of their world's death. And somewhere beyond their planet's poisoned sky, the Deathworlders waited. The landing was nothing like the graceful atmospheric entries that Iberian vessels performed. Instead of riding the electromagnetic currents down to the surface, the human craft simply pointed itself at the designated coordinates and fired its engines in controlled bursts, fighting gravity through brute force. Zephyra watched from the observation deck of their mountain facility as the shuttle descended through Nibiru's toxic atmosphere. The vessel was built like a weapon, angular, armored, and utterly unconcerned with aesthetic considerations. Its hull glowed red-hot from atmospheric friction, a sight that would have been beautiful if not for the implications of who was aboard. "Atmospheric breach in 3, 2, 1. Engineer Kaldor counted down, his instruments tracking the shuttle's descent. "They're coming in fast. Much faster than any sane pilot would attempt in this atmosphere." The shuttle disappeared behind a ridge, and moments later, a distant tremor shook the mountain as it made contact with the surface. There was no explosion, no indication of a crash, just the solid impact of a craft designed to survive hard landings. "They're requesting escort to the meeting point," Defense Coordinator Thane reported, his hand hovering over the communication controls. Should I send our guards?" Zephyra considered this. The Nibirian Guardians were trained for civil protection and emergency response, not combat. Their weapons were designed to neutralize dangerous wildlife or contain industrial accidents. Against beings who had evolved on a death world, they would be worse than useless. "Send coordinators Vel and Mira," she decided. "But keep them at a distance. We need witnesses, not heroes." The meeting had been arranged to take place in the neutral chamber, a space originally designed for diplomatic encounters with other Nibirian factions. It was located near the surface of their mountain complex, with multiple exit routes and emergency containment systems. If these Deathworlders proved hostile, the chamber could be sealed and flooded with an atmosphere lethal to most carbon-based life forms. As they waited, Zephyra tried to prepare herself mentally for what was coming. The Galactic databases contained extensive information about human psychology and behavior patterns, most of it classified under extreme caution warnings. Humans were predators who had climbed to the top of their planet's food chain not through size or natural weapons, but through intelligence, cooperation, and an apparent complete disregard for personal safety. They were known to form emotional attachments to almost anything. Their pack-bonding instincts were so strong that they would risk their lives for complete strangers or even inanimate objects they considered important. But they were also capable of casual violence that shocked most galactic civilizations. They had a saying that roughly translated to, "Speak softly and carry a big stick," which seemed to sum up their entire approach to diplomacy. The chamber's entrance chimed softly, indicating incoming visitors. Zephyra positioned herself at the center of the room, flanked by the other council members. They had decided to present a unified front, despite their physical weakness. The airlock cycled, and Zephyra got her first look at living Deathworlders. There were 3 of them, each encased in environmental suits that somehow managed to look both protective and threatening. The suits were matte black with red trim, featuring reinforced joints and integrated systems that hummed with barely contained power. Through their transparent faceplates, she could see alien features that were disturbingly familiar yet utterly foreign. The lead figure was tall by galactic standards, nearly 2 meters in height, with a muscular build that spoke of constant physical training. Its face was covered in dark fur, which the databases had identified as hair, and its eyes were a piercing blue that seemed to catalog every detail of the chamber. When it spoke, its voice came through a translation device that rendered its words in perfect Nibirian standard. "I am Commander Marcus Chun of the Terran Federation vessel Indomitable," the being said, its tone formal but carrying undertones that made Zephyra's threat assessment instincts fire. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us during this difficult time." Zephyra performed the traditional Nibirian greeting, her tentacle appendages forming the pattern for peaceful cooperation. "I am Elder Zephyra, speaking for the Nibirian people. We are grateful that someone heard our call for help." Commander Chen's expression shifted slightly, what the databases identified as a smile, though the baring of teeth made it seem more like a threat display. "Your message was quite moving. A proud civilization brought low by natural disaster, facing extinction through no fault of their own. The Federation has a long tradition of providing humanitarian aid in such situations." "Humanitarian aid," repeated Bioshaper Nyx, her translation matrix struggling with the concept. "You would help us simply because we are suffering?" The second human, introduced as Dr. Sarah Martinez, stepped forward. Her suit's medical sensors were already taking readings of the Nibirians' vital signs, Zephyra realized with some alarm. "The human species has faced extinction events multiple times in our history. We understand what it means to fight for survival against impossible odds." The third human remained silent, but Zephyra noticed its hand resting casually near what was obviously a weapon. These beings had come to a diplomatic meeting armed and ready for violence. The realization sent a chill through her secondary nervous system. "What form would this assistance take?" asked Engineer Kaldor, his practical mind cutting straight to the critical questions. Commander Chen activated a holographic projector of his own, human technology that somehow generated clearer, more detailed images than anything the Nibirians possessed. The display showed orbital manufacturing platforms, atmospheric processors, and what appeared to be massive agricultural installations. "We can provide atmospheric scrubbers to clean your air within 6 standard months," Chen explained. "Our industrial replicators can manufacture food supplies to sustain your population while we work on long-term solutions. We can even assist with planetary reconstruction once the immediate crisis is addressed." It was everything they needed. Everything they had prayed for during the long nights as their people slowly starved. Zephyra felt hope blooming in her chest for the first time in months. But she had not survived to become an elder by ignoring her instincts. "And in return?" she asked quietly. The commander's smile widened slightly. "In return, we would need certain considerations. Mining rights to help us gather the materials needed for reconstruction. Temporary administrative authority to coordinate relief efforts efficiently. Access to your cultural and scientific databases to better understand how to help you." Defense Coordinator Thane's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. His translation matrix was working overtime, but Zephyra could see him recognizing the same patterns she was detecting. These were not the requests of beings offering charitable aid. These were the demands of conquerors negotiating surrender terms. "Mining rights," she repeated carefully. "To which materials?" Dr. Martinez consulted a device on her wrist. "Your planet contains significant deposits of rare crystalline matrices that are essential for our reconstruction efforts. We would need access to approximately 60% of identifiable mineral resources to ensure adequate supply lines." 60%. The number hit Zephyra like a physical blow. The crystalline matrices were not just minerals to the Nibirians. They were the foundation of their entire technological civilization. Their ancestors had learned to work with the crystals rather than simply mining them, creating a symbiotic relationship that had sustained their society for millennia. "And the administrative authority?" asked Thane, his voice carefully neutral. Commander Chen's expression hardened slightly. "Humanitarian crises require rapid, decisive action. The Federation has extensive experience in emergency management. We would need to implement certain protocols to ensure efficient distribution of aid and prevent social disorder during the transition period." Transition period. The phrase was loaded with implications that made Zephyra's skin crawl. She exchanged a brief glance with the other council members, noting the subtle color changes in their chromatophores that indicated shared alarm. "How long would this administrative period last?" she asked. "That would depend on how quickly your people adapt to the new systems," Dr. Martinez replied. "Our experience suggests that most civilizations require 15 to 20 standard years to fully integrate Federation protocols and achieve self-sufficiency." 20 years. An entire generation of Nibirians would grow up under human rule. By the time the transition period ended, their culture, their society, their very identity as a people might be nothing more than museum pieces. "I see," Zephyra said slowly. "And if we were to decline this generous offer?" The third human finally spoke, its voice carrying a flat, emotionless tone that was somehow more frightening than open hostility. "Then we would, of course, respect your sovereignty and depart immediately. Though I should mention that our long-range sensors indicate your atmospheric degradation is accelerating. Our projections suggest you have perhaps 4 to 6 weeks before the toxicity reaches lethal levels even in your underground shelters." The message was clear: accept our terms, or die. Zephyra felt the weight of her entire species resting on her shoulders. Around her, the other council members waited for her decision, their lives, and the lives of everyone they had ever known, hanging in the balance. "We will need time to consider your proposal," she said finally. Commander Chen nodded, as if he had expected this response. "Of course. Take all the time you need. We'll be in orbit if you have any questions." He paused, his blue eyes fixing on Zephyra with uncomfortable intensity. "But don't take too long. Time is a luxury your people can't afford to waste." As the humans departed, their heavy footsteps echoing through the chamber. Zephyra stared at the holographic display they had left behind. The images of salvation flickered in the air before her, atmospheric processors, food synthesizers, hope itself made manifest. But at what cost? The deep chamber had never felt smaller than it did in the hours following the human delegation's departure. The Council of Survivors sat in a tight circle, their bioluminescent patterns dim with exhaustion and stress. Around them, the soft glow of emergency lighting cast long shadows that seemed to dance with the weight of impossible choices. "They're offering us a leash disguised as a lifeline," Defense Coordinator Thane said bluntly, his muscular frame tensed as if preparing for a fight that couldn't be won through physical force. Everything they described, the mining rights, the administrative authority, the transition period, it's a textbook occupation disguised as humanitarian aid. Bioshaper Nyx curled her healing appendages around herself, a gesture of self-comfort that spoke to the depth of her distress. But the alternative is extinction. Our atmospheric models confirm what the humans said. Even with strict rationing, we have perhaps a month before the toxicity overwhelms our filtration systems. Engineer Kaldor was hunched over a portable terminal, running calculations with the desperate intensity of someone trying to solve an unsolvable equation. "I've been analyzing their technology demonstrations. The atmospheric processors they showed us, they could work. The energy requirements are massive, but human fusion technology appears to be several generations ahead of anything we ever developed." "Of course it is," Thane replied grimly. "They're Deathworlders. Their entire technological development has been driven by the need to survive in impossible conditions and defeat enemies that should have wiped them out. They don't develop tools, they develop weapons that can occasionally be used as tools." Zephyra listened to the debate, while studying the holographic records of their meeting with the humans. She had been reviewing the footage for hours, analyzing every gesture, every micro-expression, every subtle inflection in their translated words. What she had found did not comfort her. "There's something else," she said quietly, drawing the attention of the other council members. "I've been studying their behavioral patterns, cross-referencing them with the Galactic databases on human psychology." She activated her own display, showing a complex analysis of the human's body language and vocal patterns. Commander Chen exhibited what the databases identify as predatory confidence, the behavior of a being that knows it holds all the advantages in a negotiation. Dr. Martinez showed signs of what humans call cognitive dissonance. She believes she's helping us, but part of her mind recognizes the moral ambiguity of their offer. "And the third one?" Nyx asked, though her tone suggested she didn't want to know the answer. "Specialist Reeves displayed textbook threat assessment behavior," Zephyra continued. "He wasn't here as a diplomat or a humanitarian worker. He was evaluating our military capabilities and determining the most efficient methods to neutralize any resistance." The chamber fell silent as the implication sank in. The humans hadn't come to rescue them, they had come to acquire them. The Nibirians were being offered a choice between slow death and slavery, with the terms of their enslavement packaged as salvation. "Could we fight?" Thane asked, though his voice carried little hope. "Our Guardian forces are small, but they're well-trained. If we could coordinate a resistance movement..." Kaldor shook his head sadly. "I've analyzed the energy signatures from their shuttle. That single craft carries more destructive capability than our entire planetary defense grid ever possessed. And that's just their landing vehicle. Their main ship is a kilometer-long dreadnought that could glass our mountain strongholds from orbit. Then we're discussing the terms of our surrender, not whether to surrender," Nyx said, her chromatophores shifting to the deep blue of profound sadness. Zephyra studied the faces of her fellow survivors, 3 of the most brilliant minds their civilization had ever produced, reduced to choosing between extinction and absorption. But as she looked at them, something else caught her attention. The soft glow of the chamber's bioluminescent moss was pulsing in a pattern she recognized. "Wait," she said suddenly, her tentacle appendages rising with excitement. "Kaldor, you said the humans' technology was generations ahead of ours. But what if that's exactly what we need?" The engineer looked confused. "I don't understand." Zephyra stood, her mind racing as pieces of a desperate plan began to fall into place. The humans see us as weak, primitive, helpless. They're offering to save us because they believe we have nothing to offer in return except our subservience. But what if we could change that equation? How? Thane asked. We have no weapons, no resources, no leverage. We have knowledge, Zephyra replied, gesturing to the glowing moss around them. Specifically, we have knowledge they need but don't know they need it yet. She activated the chamber's main display system, calling up records from their civilization's golden age. Images filled the air, vast cities that grew like living organisms, technology that worked in perfect harmony with natural forces, methods of energy manipulation that made human fusion reactors look like primitive campfires. Our entire civilization was built on understanding the relationship between consciousness and quantum fields, she explained. We didn't just use our planet's crystalline matrices as power sources, we formed symbiotic relationships with them. Our technology was alive in ways that purely mechanical systems could never be. Kaldor leaned forward, his engineer's mind beginning to grasp the implications. You're talking about bioquantum integration. But that knowledge is mostly theoretical now. We never wrote it down because it was passed through direct neural interface with the planetary consciousness. Exactly, Zephyra said. And when the crystalline core was damaged, we lost our connection to that knowledge base. But the information still exists, it's just inaccessible to us in our current state. How does that help us? Nyx asked. If we can't access the knowledge ourselves, how can we use it as leverage? Zephyra's chromatophores began to pulse with the golden light of determination. Because the humans don't know we can't access it. To them, we're the remnants of a civilization that achieved things their technology can't duplicate. They're offering to save us, but what if we could convince them they need us to save them? The concept was audacious to the point of insanity. But as the other council members began to understand what she was proposing, their own bioluminescent patterns began to shift from despair to desperate hope. You're talking about a bluff, Thane said slowly. Making them believe we possess strategic value beyond our planet's resources. Not just strategic value, Zephyra corrected. Essential value. The humans are expansionists. Their entire history is one of conquest and colonization. But they've never encountered a civilization that developed along bioquantum lines. If we can convince them that our knowledge could revolutionize their technology, they would want us as partners rather than subjects. Kaldor finished, his excitement building. But how do we maintain the deception long enough to actually regain access to our lost knowledge? Zephyra smiled, an expression that revealed the sharp intelligence that had made her an elder despite her relatively young age. We don't regain it. We recreate it. Human technology is brute force applied with incredible precision. Our technology was subtle force applied with perfect harmony. If we can find a way to merge those approaches, we could create something neither civilization could achieve alone. Nyx breathed, her healing instincts recognizing the elegance of the solution. It was a desperate gamble built on half-truths and impossible promises. But it was the only path that offered any hope of preserving not just their lives, but their identity as a people. There's one more thing, Zephyra said, her voice dropping to a whisper. For this to work, we need to convince the humans that we're choosing to help them, not that we're being coerced. They need to believe they're gaining willing allies, not reluctant slaves. Because willing allies share their knowledge freely. Thane understood. While slaves hoard what little power they have. The plan was insane. It required them to trust beings who had essentially threatened their extinction while offering salvation. It demanded that they gamble their entire civilization on their ability to eventually deliver on promises they couldn't currently keep. It meant walking into the jaws of predators and convincing them that cooperation was more valuable than consumption. But it was the only chance they had. As the council prepared to send their response to the humans, Zephyra allowed herself one moment of doubt. They were about to embark on a path that would either lead to a new golden age for both civilizations, or to the complete absorption of the Niberian people into the human empire. Either way, the Nibur their ancestors had known was already dead. All they could do now was try to plant the seeds of something new in the ashes of what had been lost. The message they sent was brief but carefully crafted. The Council of Survivors accepts the Federation's offer of assistance. We look forward to a mutually beneficial partnership. In orbit above their dying world, the human dreadnought acknowledged their transmission and began preparations for full-scale intervention. The die was cast, and there would be no going back. The next phase of Niberian history was about to begin, written in a language of desperation, deception, and the faint hope that intelligence and determination could triumph over raw power. The human relief convoy descended through Nibiru's toxic atmosphere like a mechanical swarm, their ships cutting through the poisoned air with the brutal efficiency that characterized everything about Deathworlder technology. From her position in the observation chamber, Zephyra watched dozens of cargo haulers and construction vessels establish a beachhead on the planet's surface, their pilots seemingly unconcerned with the atmospheric conditions that would kill most galactic species in minutes. Phase 1 deployment is proceeding ahead of schedule, Engineer Caldor reported, his voice tight with a mixture of amazement and apprehension. They've already established 3 atmospheric processing stations and begun construction on what appears to be a supply depot the size of our old capital city. The speed of human operations was breathtaking. Within 6 hours of the convoy's arrival, they had transformed a barren stretch of toxic wasteland into a bustling industrial complex. Massive machines, each the size of a Niberian dwelling, moved with choreographed precision, clearing ground, laying foundations, and assembling structures that would have taken Niberian crews months to complete. They're not just building infrastructure, Defense Coordinator Thane observed, studying the tactical displays. They're building a fortress. Those supply depots have reinforced foundations and weapon emplacements. The communication arrays are positioned for maximum surveillance coverage. They're preparing for a long-term occupation. Zephyra nodded grimly. Everything was proceeding exactly as she had predicted, which meant their desperate plan was about to be put to its first test. Dr. Martinez is requesting permission to establish a medical station in the mountain complex, Bioshaper Nix reported. She wants to begin health assessments of our population. Grant the permission, Zephyra decided. But make sure she's escorted by our people at all times. We need to begin establishing the foundation for our enhanced cooperation proposal. The term, enhanced cooperation, was a euphemism they had developed for their strategy of convincing the humans that Niberian knowledge was essential for both civilizations' advancement. It was a delicate balance. They needed to appear valuable enough to be treated as partners rather than subjects, while not revealing that their current access to their own advanced knowledge was severely limited. Dr. Martinez arrived 2 hours later, accompanied by a team of human medics whose equipment could have supplied a small city with power. The humans moved through the mountain complex with the measured confidence of beings accustomed to hostile environments, their environmental suits humming with systems designed to keep them alive in conditions that would challenge most military hardware. Elder Zephyra, Dr. Martinez said through her translation system, "Thank you for allowing us to establish medical support for your people. I understand your species has unique physiological requirements." "Indeed we do," Zephyra replied carefully. "Our biology is intimately connected to the electromagnetic fields that permeate our planet. The disruption of those fields has had cascading effects on our health that go beyond simple malnutrition." This was the first layer of their deception, a truth that would lead the humans toward a larger misunderstanding. The Niberians' health problems were indeed connected to the electromagnetic disruption, but not in the way Dr. Martinez would likely interpret. As the human medical team began their examinations, Zephyra watched Dr. Martinez's reactions carefully. The doctor was clearly brilliant, her instruments detecting biological patterns that seemed to fascinate and puzzle her in equal measure. "Remarkable," Dr. Martinez murmured, studying the readings from her medical scanners. "Your cellular structures appear to have quantum coherence properties I've never seen in biological systems. These electromagnetic signatures, it's almost like your bodies are designed to interface directly with your planet's energy fields. Our ancestors called it the harmony," Zephyra said, allowing a note of wistful sadness to enter her voice. We were taught that consciousness and quantum fields were part of a unified whole, that technology and biology could work together rather than in opposition. Dr. Martinez looked up from her instruments, her expression intense. You're talking about bioquantum integration on a cellular level. The theoretical applications would be extraordinary. Direct neural interface with quantum processing systems, biological computers that could solve problems beyond the scope of any artificial intelligence. Such things were commonplace in our golden age, Zephyra replied, the words tasting like ash in her mouth because they were simultaneously true and false. The technologies had existed, but their understanding of them had been intuitive rather than analytical. They had lived in harmony with their planet's consciousness without fully comprehending the mechanisms involved. Could these technologies be recreated? Dr. Martinez asked, her professional excitement barely contained. With human industrial capacity and Nibirian bioquantum knowledge, we could achieve breakthroughs that would revolutionize both our civilizations. And there it was, the hook cast and taken. Zephyra felt a mixture of triumph and terror as she realized their plan was actually working. The humans were beginning to see the Nibirians not as helpless refugees, but as possessors of knowledge that could advance human capabilities beyond anything they had previously imagined. Recreation would require extensive cooperation, Zephyra said slowly, as if considering the implications for the first time. Our knowledge has always been passed through direct neural interface with the planetary consciousness. To share it with others would require unprecedented trust and partnership. Dr. Martinez's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. From her perspective, the Nibirians were offering access to technologies that could transform human civilization, but only if they were treated as equal partners rather than conquered subjects. I need to report this to Commander Chen immediately, she said, her voice tight with excitement. This changes everything about our mission parameters. As Dr. Martinez hurried away to contact her superior, Zephyra allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. The first phase of their plan was working. The humans were beginning to see strategic value in Nibirian cooperation beyond simple resource extraction. But the real test would come when they demanded proof of capabilities the Nibirians no longer possessed. Engineer Kaldor appeared at her side, his expression grim. The atmospheric processors are working, he reported quietly. The air quality in Sector 7 has improved by 30% in just 6 hours. Whatever else we can say about the humans, they keep their promises about technical capabilities. And that's exactly what makes them so dangerous, Zephyra replied. They have the power to make good on both their promises and their threats. Defense Coordinator Thane joined them, his posture tense with warrior instincts that had no outlet in their current situation. Commander Chen has requested a formal meeting with the full council. He wants to discuss expanded cooperation opportunities based on Dr. Martinez's preliminary report. The phrase sent a chill through Zephyra's system. Expanded cooperation could mean anything from genuine partnership to more sophisticated forms of exploitation. The humans were clearly intrigued by the possibility of bioquantum integration, but they were also cunning predators who had survived on a death world by learning to recognize and exploit weaknesses. Schedule the meeting for tomorrow, she decided. That will give us time to prepare our presentation and gather the materials we'll need for the demonstration. Demonstration? Kaldor asked nervously. Zephyra's chromatophores shifted to the deep gold of determination mixed with fear. If we're going to convince them that we're valuable partners rather than useful slaves, we need to show them something they've never seen before. Something that proves bioquantum integration isn't just theoretical. But we can't actually demonstrate bioquantum integration, Nix protested. We lost that capability when the planetary consciousness was disrupted. No, Zephyra corrected. We lost our intuitive connection to the planetary consciousness. But the quantum fields are still there, still accessible to those who understand the underlying principles. We just need to approach them analytically rather than intuitively. She activated a holographic display showing the mountain complex's internal structure. The humans assume our primitive technology is inferior to theirs because it appears biological rather than mechanical. But what if we could show them that biological systems can achieve precision and efficiency that mechanical systems can't match? Understanding began to dawn on the other council members' faces. They might not be able to recreate the grand bioquantum technologies of their ancestors, but they could demonstrate the principles involved using the resources they still had available. The Moss networks, Kaldor breathed. They're still quantum coherent on a small scale. If we could amplify their processing capabilities using human power sources, we could create a functional biocomputer that demonstrates quantum consciousness integration. Nix finished. It wouldn't be on the scale of our ancestors' achievements, but it would prove the principles are valid. It was a desperate improvisation, built on half-remembered theories and improvised solutions. But it was also the only chance they had to prove their value to the humans before the transition period began in earnest. As the council dispersed to begin preparations for their demonstration, Zephyra remained in the observation chamber, watching the human construction crews work through the night. Their machines never seemed to tire, their efficiency never flagged, their purpose never wavered. Tomorrow, she would attempt to convince beings who had conquered a death world that a dying civilization possessed knowledge they couldn't afford to lose. She would gamble everything on a bluff built from quantum moss and desperate hope. And if she failed, the Niberian people would become footnotes in human history, a cautionary tale about the fate of civilizations too weak to protect themselves from those strong enough to save them. But if she succeeded, if she could make the humans see them as partners rather than prizes, then perhaps something new could grow from the ashes of what had been lost. The future of her people rested on her ability to make predators believe they needed what she could barely remember how to provide. It was, she reflected, exactly the kind of impossible challenge that had made the humans themselves so formidable. Perhaps there was hope in that irony, if she was clever enough to find it. The neutral chamber had been transformed overnight into something that was part laboratory, part shrine, and part theater. Bioluminescent moss had been carefully cultivated into intricate patterns that pulsed with quantum-coherent energy, while crystalline fragments salvaged from the planet's damaged core were arranged in geometric configurations that hummed with barely contained power. To human eyes, it would appear to be a fusion of advanced technology and biological artistry, exactly the impression Zephyra hoped to create. Commander Chen arrived with a full delegation this time, Dr. Martinez with her medical sensors, Dr. Yuki Tanaka whom they identified as a quantum physicist, and Specialist Reeves whose weapon systems remained conspicuously ready despite the diplomatic nature of the meeting. But it was the fourth member of their party that made Zephyra's chromatophores shift with alarm, a tall woman introduced as Admiral Sarah Harrison, whose insignia marked her as the commanding officer of the human fleet. "Elder Zephyra," Admiral Harrison said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected billions of lives. "Dr. Martinez's report has sparked considerable interest among my staff. If your people truly possess the bioquantum integration capabilities she described, it could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness-based computing. Our ancestors would have called it thinking with the planet," Zephyra replied, gesturing to the moss patterns that surrounded them. "The boundary between mind and matter was always artificial to us. We learned to work with quantum consciousness rather than imposing our will upon it." Dr. Tanaka activated a series of scanning devices, his instruments detecting energy patterns that made his eyebrows rise in surprise. "These quantum signatures are unlike anything in our databases. The coherence level suggests some form of macroscopic quantum entanglement, but the stability patterns are completely unprecedented." Engineer Kaldor stepped forward, playing his role perfectly. "Would you like to see the integration in action?" he asked, his voice carefully modulated to suggest both pride and caution. "The demonstration will require volunteers from your team to interface directly with our bioquantum network." Admiral Harrison's expression sharpened. "What kind of interface?" Bioshaper Nix moved to the center of the chamber, where a particularly dense cluster of crystalline fragments pulsed with soft light. "Nothing invasive. The process involves conscious synchronization with quantum field fluctuations. Your thoughts would temporarily become part of the network, allowing you to experience information processing as a living system rather than a mechanical one." It was a calculated risk. The demonstration they had prepared was real, but limited. The Moss networks could indeed interface with conscious thought, creating a form of biological computer that operated on quantum principles. But it was a pale shadow of what their ancestors had achieved, more proof of concept than practical application. Dr. Martinez stepped forward eagerly. "I'd like to volunteer. If this works the way you describe, it could provide insights into consciousness-based medicine that we've only theorized about." "Very well," Zephyra said, hoping her nervousness didn't show in her chromatophores. "Please place your hands on the moss clusters and focus your thoughts on a mathematical problem, something complex enough to require significant processing power." Dr. Martinez removed her gloves and placed her palms against the glowing moss. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire chamber erupted in cascading patterns of light as the bioquantum network activated, drawing energy from the crystalline fragments and processing Dr. Martinez's thoughts through living quantum structures. "Incredible," Dr. Martinez whispered, her eyes wide with amazement. "I can feel the calculations happening. Not like using a computer interface, more like thinking with a billion minds at once." The moss patterns pulsed in response to her thoughts, creating visual representations of complex mathematical equations that resolved themselves in ways that seemed to defy conventional logic. Dr. Tanaka's instruments went wild, detecting quantum processing speeds that exceeded anything human technology had achieved. "The efficiency ratios are impossible," he breathed. "This system is processing information at speeds that should require massive energy inputs, but the power consumption is minimal. It's as if the quantum fields are providing computational assistance." Admiral Harrison watched the demonstration with the calculating gaze of a strategic planner. "How scalable is this technology? Could it be applied to navigation computers, tactical analysis systems, communication networks?" "In theory, there are no limits," Zephyra replied, choosing her words carefully. "Our ancestors built cities that were essentially planet-sized bioquantum computers, capable of solving problems that spanned multiple dimensions of reality. But such achievements require perfect harmony between technological capability and consciousness-based integration." "Perfect harmony," Commander Chen repeated thoughtfully. "Meaning?" Defense Coordinator Thanes spoke for the first time during the meeting, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. "Meaning you cannot simply take this technology and force it to work for you. Bioquantum integration requires willing cooperation between all participants. The moment you try to use force or coercion, the quantum coherence collapses and the system becomes useless." The message was clear without being explicitly stated: treat us as slaves, and you lose access to the very capabilities you want to acquire. Admiral Harrison's expression revealed nothing, but Zephyra caught the subtle exchange of glances between the human officers. They were recalculating their entire approach to the Niberian situation, weighing the benefits of partnership against the complications it would introduce. "Fascinating," Dr. Tanaka said, his scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic caution. "Could this technology be taught to humans? Could we learn to interface with bioquantum systems ourselves?" "Perhaps," Zephyra said slowly, as if considering the implications for the first time. "But it would require extensive collaboration and trust. The learning process involves opening your consciousness to quantum fields in ways that could be vulnerable if attempted without proper guidance." It was another layer of their strategy, suggesting that humans could benefit from bioquantum integration, but only through willing partnership with Niberian teachers. The implication was that forcing the relationship would result in failure or worse. Dr. Martinez removed her hands from the moss clusters, her face flushed with excitement and wonder. "The potential applications are staggering. Medical systems that could diagnose and treat conditions by interfacing directly with a patient's quantum biology. Engineering projects that could design themselves by thinking through problems rather than calculating them. Weapon systems that could adapt and evolve in real time." Specialist Reeves added quietly, his tactical mind immediately grasping the military implications. Admiral Harrison's expression hardened slightly. "We'll need to discuss the security implications of this technology in detail. Bioquantum systems that require conscious cooperation could pose significant risks if they fell into hostile hands." Zephyra felt a chill run through her system. The humans were already thinking about how to weaponize and control bioquantum integration. But she had anticipated this reaction. Predators always looked for ways to turn new discoveries into advantages over their competitors. Security concerns are indeed significant, she agreed. That's why our ancestors developed extensive safeguards. Bioquantum systems can only be activated by beings who understand both the technical principles and the ethical responsibilities involved. Attempting to use them for purposes contrary to quantum harmony results in cascade failures that destroy the system. It was a complete fabrication, but delivered with the conviction of absolute truth. If the humans believed that bioquantum systems had built-in ethical safeguards, they would be more likely to see partnership as necessary rather than convenient. Commander Chen stepped forward, his predatory smile returning. I think we need to revise our cooperation agreement. If your people possess capabilities this advanced, then our relationship should reflect that strategic value. What are you proposing? Zephyra asked, though she had a good idea where this was heading. Full partnership, Admiral Harrison said bluntly. Joint research initiatives, shared technological development, integrated command structures for system security. The Federation is prepared to offer your people full citizenship status and autonomous territorial rights in exchange for complete access to bioquantum integration knowledge. It was more than Zephyra had dared to hope for, but also more dangerous than she had feared. Full partnership meant the humans would expect full access to Niberian knowledge that the Niberians themselves only partially possessed. Such an arrangement would require careful consideration by our full council, she said diplomatically. The knowledge you seek represents the accumulated wisdom of 50,000 years of civilization. Sharing it completely would be unprecedented. Naturally, Admiral Harrison replied. But I should mention that time is a factor. Our fleet includes several science vessels equipped for advanced research, but they're scheduled for reassignment to other sectors within 6 standard months. If we're going to establish a meaningful partnership, we need to begin immediately. 6 months. The timeline was both generous and terrifying. It gave the Niberians time to develop their deception into something approaching reality, but it also meant they had to deliver tangible results quickly enough to maintain human interest. We accept your proposal in principle, Zephyra said finally. But the implementation will require careful coordination to ensure both safety and efficacy. As the human delegation departed to draft formal partnership agreements, Zephyra found herself alone with the other council members in the chamber that still pulsed with bioquantum energy. Their desperate gambit had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. The humans now saw them as valuable partners rather than helpless refugees. But success brought its own dangers. They had bought themselves time and status by promising capabilities they couldn't fully deliver. Now they had to somehow make those promises reality before the humans discovered the depth of their deception. 6 months, Kaldor said quietly. Can we really develop functional bioquantum integration technologies in 6 months? We have to, Zephyra replied, watching the moss patterns slowly fade back to their natural luminescence. Because the alternative is being exposed as frauds by beings who have little patience for those who waste their time. The gambit had worked, but it had also committed them to a path that led either to a genuine revolution in conscious technology, or to a betrayal that would make their original extinction look merciful by comparison. Either way, the next 6 months would determine whether the Niberian people had a future, or whether they had simply bought themselves a more elaborate form of doom.